Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education University, and I'm your host, Tim Bokentz. I talk all the time on this podcast about reflecting, why we should look back on what we've done, just thinking about what we can learn from our experiences and what we can do to improve as we move forward. And I was doing exactly that when it came to the podcast, just thinking about, some of my favorite episodes from the year, some of my favorite conversations I've had over the past 12 months, and kind of reflecting on what I've learned from them. So I started collecting some of those conversations, and I wanted to share some of those highlights with you in today's episode. So these are clips from a handful of my favorite conversations from 2023. We're going to talk about art teacher myths and assessment and creativity and how assessment can foster more creativity, and even talk about engaging the community through your art teaching. So if you hear anything that resonates with you, we will have links to all of the episodes in the show notes, and that way you can listen to the full conversation. So first up is Kristina Brown. Kristina is an awesome photographer and art teacher from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She helped us host the NOW conference this summer, and she will help us again in February at the winter conference. Now, when she was on the podcast with me, she talked about some of the creativity challenges that she gives her students. And in this clip, we'll hear some of the benefits of challenging our students to be more creative. Curiosity is just about how kids respond to the challenges. Like, are these things that they enjoy? Do they get excited when you're introducing challenges?
I think the challenges are so much fun because, for the most part, I have a high level of engagement, especially towards the middle or end part of the year once the students have fostered a community within the classroom. Yeah. So the challenges become competitive, but in so much it's fun to watch because you also have your students who may not normally shine with the big projects, and they kind of pull forward like a dark horse. Yeah. And so it also allows a break from the monotonous, 2-week long project, and then we'll start planning again. And so the challenges allow them a break of that, and it allows them to think outside the box very quickly without all the planning and overthinking that happens with the big project sometimes.
Yeah. So, how often do you introduce these? Is it just in between bigger projects? Is it just when you feel like it? Is there a schedule?
That's a great question. It's kind of all over the place. So first thing is usually it's when I feel students are in creative ruts. So if I feel the environment or as artists, we all get in creative ruts cyclically, right? So if I can tell overall we're all running kind of on low fuel, I'll switch it up with a creative challenge for the day, or I like to throw them in after big, long projects, or maybe just at the end of a grading period so we can all take a breather.
Okay, that sounds awesome. And I feel like that's a great way to apply those. I know everybody who's listening to this is probably thinking, when do I break them out? How much is too much? And so no, I think that's some good advice. And obviously we talk all the time about, getting our kids to be more creative, help them develop their creative thinking skills. So what kind of skills are you seeing them develop when you are doing these creativity challenges? What are kids learning from them?
With these creativity challenges, I find that first thing is problem solving. Right off the bat, you're given a certain amount of variables and you have to solve that problem. And so that's a big one. But the second one is collaboration, especially with the challenges that involve group work. We all, I guess, traditionally don't really like group work.
So, I am one of those people too.
Exactly. And so luckily with these challenges, it's not a long-term thing. So they're not stuck with this group for very long, but I allow them to organically fall into their roles. So with
Mm-hmm.
group challenges specifically, it mimics the real world photography studio where you will have a lead, you'll have an assistant, you'll have an intern who's really good at sweeping.
Yeah.
You'll have every type of role in there, and they fall organically in there. And so seeing the collaboration and the problem solving socially is a big skill that I think is gained. And then the lastly is the direct application of learning from what we have learned through the year up into that challenge. They are able to apply how to light, how to set up, how to compose, all of that immediately, instead of filling out, like a worksheet. So I think it's another activity that you can observe the direct application of learning that we have throughout the year.
Staying with the theme of creativity, I want to share part of the conversation I had with Katie White about how we can use assessment to help nurture a culture of creativity in our classroom. Katie wrote a book called Unlocked and multiple other books about assessment, and I absolutely loved this conversation with her. I think I might have learned more from her than from any other interview I did in 2023. So here's a small part of that discussion. First, I want to talk a little bit more about creativity and kind of what that looks like from your view. As I know in your presentation, you talked a little bit about what you call a culture of creativity. And I would love for you to just kind of define that, talk about, what does that look like in the classroom? Like what are students doing when they're part of a culture of creativity?
Sure. So the way that I phrase it in the book Unlocked that I wrote about this is I call those that creative culture like the creation of a healthy creative space. And so we think about the physical space, right, that we offer students, but we also really think about a safe emotional space, a safe social space, a safe intellectual space, all of those parts of that space that we have to create. Because in that space, we really want students to take risks. I mean, that's the foundation of creative thinking, is trying something out, right? But alongside risk taking, we're going to have people who make mistakes, because part of taking a risk is potentially having the outcome not work in our favor. There's going to be moments of discomfort where we just aren't sure what to do next, what materials to choose, what approach to take. And we might just falter a bit. And so part of creating that culture of creativity is making sure that mistakes are part of the process, and that's how they're framed. It's turning that discomfort into something that's constructive. So when we feel uncomfortable, what's available to us? How can we walk through that instead of turning away from it and avoiding it? And how do we turn those missteps into something productive moving forward? So that's part of that sort of social emotional safety that has to be part of a creative space. And then, you insert things like imagination. I mean, these aren't foreign words to people who work in the arts, but
Right.
Imagination, experimentation, wonder, play, with flexible spaces where students have agency to collaborate, experiment with each other, with themselves. And I also think, that creative spaces are, of course, problem focused. So there's that real emphasis on experimentation and curiosity, but also connected to relevance for students. So students often feel safer making mistakes and picking themselves up from failure when it matters to them. And so that, notion of choice in the middle of ambiguity, stretching, but also supporting students where they need support in terms of skill development. The last couple things I would say around that creative space is just being attentive to the language we're using around the development of creative skills and decision making and that strong purpose. Just making sure that our students are aware of places where they can make decisions and how they might gather what they need to do that well. And then the last sort of thing that I would say that feels, again, a bit radical is just decentering the teacher as the primary decision maker in that space,
Okay.
which is something to just throw out there, but definitely assert that that's not an easy thing. And there's a lot of nuance to that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a discussion that happens a lot amongst art teachers, just like what role do we play as an educator? And, that varies by comfort level, just by what grade you're teaching, by how much art your kids have had in the past. Like there's a lot that goes, like you said, it's very nuanced. So, but I think that is a discussion that's worth having. But I would like to circle back to talking a little bit more about assessment. And, you mentioned using assessment to kind of guide our creativity, or to use it as, how it can be a way in to being creative. And so I guess I would love to just hear a little bit more about what that looks like, or what you're envisioning there. Just thinking about, how can assessment help, or how can it support with, our kids becoming creative, with developing that culture of creativity.
Okay. Well, okay, there's a few things. And they're probably not in the best order, but I'm going to give it a go. So again, going back to the idea that assessment is really imagining a future state, whether it's a product or a performance or just a process that we want to try, materials we want to investigate, but just imagining that future state and then figuring out where we are in this moment, and looking at the distance between those two things, and pivoting in a way that makes sense. If that's what assessment is, then we can start to imagine ways that we might insert more intentional taking stock of where we are today moments, right? So it's that check-in, right? Where, how are we doing? What decisions have we made up to this point? What are we seeing? What are we noticing? What are we wondering? What are we hoping for? And then what options are available to us? But, even within that, there's again, I go back to the word nuance. There's a couple of nuances that I think are unique to the creative space. When you talk about assessment in general education, you often talk about, setting criteria right off the hop, making sure that students know what's expected of them, and, descriptions of quality. But I think in a creative space, we have to delay that criteria setting somewhat. I think there needs to be moments where students are playing and investigating and wondering without the structure initially. And then when we actually engage in criteria setting with students, they have a scaffold of experience on which to hang that. And so they can become partners in determining what the outcome might be. So that's kind of a different thing for a creative space than I think what we talk about in other classroom spaces. Alongside that is, I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, but like delaying that summative judgment for as long as possible. Because as long as things are high stakes, we just don't get that risk taking that's essential for really authentic meaning making by kids.
Yeah.
And then we got to find places to embed feedback, reflection, that sort of pause and check-in process, students checking on their own goals, but also students checking in with each other and with us to figure out where they might go next, really positioning them as the decision makers again. So the purpose of that feedback in that assessment process is to cause thinking and decision making, not to fix a particular product or performance necessarily, which is the art of feedback. And then lastly, I would just say, like, elevate those observations and conversations as assessment methods, because it's really by watching and listening that we can gather that really strong sense of where students are and where they're hoping to go, so we can help facilitate their movements in that direction.
Now, of course, a look back at 2023 would not be complete without mentioning Amanda Heyn and Janet Taylor, probably my two most frequent guests from this year. Amanda's on every month with the mailbag episode. Janet did a bunch of episodes, including the What Do New Teachers Need to Know podcast series with me. And so, two familiar voices. I wanted a clip with both of them, and actually I remembered that they had been on together. So we're jumping in here mid-conversation as the three of us are talking about our favorite and least favorite art teacher myths.
All right. How about I move on to the next one?
Yes, let's hear
Okay.
your myth.
All right. So this particular one is very near to and dear to my heart. And it's that artistic talent is inherent or innate,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so I'm sure that it's near and dear to every one of you out there too. And I have to say, so even like my personal business, right? I have like a side business. I teach courses and my art, sell my art and stuff. And my tagline is literally everyone is creative, right? And I think that's what, as art teachers, we strive to, advocate and communicate and educate people on, right? Is that everyone has this kind of artistic side or artistic talent. And, just like anything else, we know that art takes a lot of practice. And a good example of this would be those, I kind of love them because they're great advocacy tools. Those videos where people show they're like, I drew this portrait when I was in high school. And then here's my portrait the next year and the next year. And then they keep going. And they're just like these incredible growth that you see. And it's like, yeah, that person started off really strong. And then look at them now. They obviously put in the work and effort to get there, right? It just didn't they weren't doing that at 10, or whatever, right? But I also think that people equate talent, quote unquote, with realism, like artistic talent.
Yes,
for sure.
Right?
For sure.
So that's like a whole nother rabbit hole, a whole other podcast about, Yeah. So that being said, just like anything, some people are and do have genius in the arts, and some people have natural innate talent, meaning they pick it up quickly, they see things in unique or special ways, right? Just like some people have more tendencies towards like math or writing or whatever. I feel like there's this misconception that, since we all started off in an artistic way, right? We all hold crayons, do some little drawings, whatever it is, that we should just assume that it doesn't take any practice. So this is, like I said, special to me. And I do like to spend time combating this. Like if this is a hill I'm going to die on, this is probably one of those. So like advocacy, educating about that, showing students work from level 1 all the way through AP, like one student's progress, I think is a big piece to show that growth and practice. And often when I teach classes, even in my high school, I talk to them about like math, right? You can't do algebra without learning how to add and subtract first. So don't expect to be just this amazing out of the box artist, right? So you just need tools in your toolbox. And I think that's actually been a really helpful way to talk to even adults about it. I think they like, oh, I get that now because maybe I'm, a CPA or something like that, right?
Exactly. But I mean, just like anything, you have to put in the work. And like I said, the more you can educate people about that, the better off we're going to be. Okay. So my myth, one that Amanda mentioned at the beginning, is that art teachers just sit and paint all day. And, obviously that's not a myth amongst art teachers. But I think it speaks to the idea of, how we're thought of around the school, what reputation we have, what people see, when they look at us as art teachers. And so, like you just mentioned, it shows the importance of advocacy and like showing people what we're doing in our classroom, what we do all day, is not just finger painting or whatever you may want to say is out there. But, I think showing the growth, like you mentioned, showing what kids are doing, what you're doing, that's good for you. That's good for your program. And most importantly, it's beneficial for your kids, for people to know all of the work that goes into our jobs and all of the things that we're doing with our students. So all of that can be incredibly valuable. So
I feel like that's a myth I would like to be true. Like I would
I wish it were. Yes. All right. Amanda, would you like to give us your second myth?
I would. My second myth is that you have to put on an art show every year.
Oh.
Yes. So again, we have probably over 30, 40 articles, podcasts, whatever, about putting on art shows, from planning to the day of to non-traditional art shows, like the drive-through art show we featured that Lindsay Moss and Sarah Krajewski did, or faculty shows. Like we have a lot about art shows. So if you want to do an art show, that's wonderful. And we have things to support you. And I also did one most years that I taught. I went way overboard. One year I baked over 1,000 cookies.
What?
And yeah,
Like,
they
how
were.
do you have time for that? How did you do that?
This was before I had my own children.
All right.
So, and they were rainbow cookies. I mean, it was silly. It was very silly, and I should not have done that. But the year I did not do an art show was my very first year teaching. And I would suggest no one do an art show their very first year of teaching. And also, whatever other seasons of life where it's not good for you to have 80 to 150 extra hours of work during the school year. Maybe you're moving, maybe you're a new parent, maybe you are taking care of a family member, whatever it is. Maybe you're mentally tapped out. If you do not have time to give or energy to give to an art show, it is okay not to do one. It is okay to sit it out for a year. That said, I do think that teachers should always be thinking about different ways to showcase student artwork, but that can happen in much smaller, more accessible, or I should say easier ways throughout the year. Does not have to culminate in a big, gigantic showcase. So you can keep your bulletin boards updated. You can do small frame displays in your office. You can use social media. You can use your school newsletter. There are so many ways where you can do it in a small way, but in a way that is still impactful in showing what is happening in your classroom. So that's what I have to say about art shows. Did you guys both do art shows?
I did art shows every year. Like I love that stuff, but I 100% understand if other people don't or they don't have time. So I would say, if you can do it, it's worth celebrating. If you can't do it, that's fine too. It's no shame in not doing one, and I don't think it should be an obligation or an expectation. Finally, I want to close the show with Candido Crespo. Candido has been someone whose teaching I have admired for a long time. We were lucky enough to have him host the Everyday Art Room podcast for us a while back, and in this conversation on Art Ed Radio, he shared about his Creatividad project, blending art teaching and parenthood, and some of the benefits of art teachers bringing their craft, bringing their teaching out into the community. From your perspective, like, what are you learning when you're doing this? Like, what are you seeing when you take your art teacher skills, your creativity, your knowledge, like, out into the community? Like, what are you putting out there, and what are you getting back in return?
Yeah, I think all of these things that I'm about to say were all unanticipated. I think when I wanted to share this concept, it was more like I just wanted to share. That was the sole purpose of this thing, was just, how can I share this idea with other dads? Because I think this is special, and I want them to have this information. Like, keeping this information to me would not be useful. That's just, it's not valuable that way.
Yeah.
And so all I wanted to do was share. So anything I say right now has been like something I wasn't prepared for. So number one is confidence, right? I'm very confident in front of my students in the classroom. And I think, if for as long as I can remember, Meet the Teacher Night and parent teacher conferences have always been like the thing where, to me, has always been a little bit more nerve-wracking than teacher evaluations. Like, the principal I welcome in whenever, but when I have to deal directly with parents, it's always been like, how do I prepare for this thing? Right. Mostly because I'm concerned about, like, my presentation. I want the parents to be able to know that they can trust me in the time that I'm with their children, because no oversight. That's a big trust, right? These parents are leaving their children with us, and the whole, and I want them to know that they're in good hands. But in this particular case, the parents are the ones that I'm telling, I'm talking to the parents directly, and I'm telling them, like, no, you need this thing. And so sometimes people confuse this project a little bit for like me teaching kids, but I'm not teaching kids. That's what I do as my day job. Like, I don't want on the weekends, come Saturday, I'm not looking to teach.
You need a break.
I'm not looking to any other kids. But I will talk to the parents directly. Like, these messages and everything I'm saying are for you. So a new level of confidence came out of that. Almost like, I think this is kind of selfish too, and that it's grown to be selfish, is like my perspective on or the accessibility for me to see other fathers parenting. Like, I haven't done that before. I haven't been able to be in a position where I can observe other fathers interacting with their children and what methods and means they use or tools they use for communication. That's been really cool. genuine joy. Tim, I mean, like, just to be in that space where I'm just happy the entire time. Like the entire time I'm talking to these families, I'm engaging with them. We're getting messy, and the entire time I'm just happy. It's just genuine joy. Is one of the things I guess I get out of it the most.
Yeah.
I mentioned life beyond red tape, and that's something that's really true. I think if any teacher ever has the opportunity to do some community-based art education, like, step out of your comfort zone and check it out so that you know just how great you really are.
And we will go ahead and wrap it up now. I hope you have enjoyed what were some of the highlights of the past year for me. And again, we have the full episodes linked in the show notes if you want to listen to the entire conversations surrounding any of those clips. But I hope you have enjoyed listening to this podcast throughout the year as much as I've enjoyed making it. We are on holiday break after this week, so a couple of archived episodes coming to you over the next couple of weeks to finish out the calendar year. Then we will be back strong with new episodes in 2024. I can't wait. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education University with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Thank you for listening, and we will be back next week.